It is Tuesday's episode, people, of the Locked On Fantasy Hockey Podcast with your boy Steele Roden and, of course, Big Flip Livingstone. The injury bug is biting around the league, and that has fantasy implications abound. We have to talk about some teams ready to press the panic button, and, of course, big-time bets to get you this seasonal holiday money. Let's get right to it.
You're Locked On Fantasy Hockey, your daily podcast on fantasy hockey. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is going on, everybody, and welcome back inside the lab. That is the Locked On Fantasy Hockey Podcast. We are excited for a big-time Tuesday episode. We got injuries to talk about, fantasy implications. We also have some fire big-time bets. I'm seeing my man Steele out here. He's picking up steam. We got some fire picks coming up at the end of the episode as well. But we also have to talk about some teams ready to press the panic button. And that has fantasy implications as well. And today, we're going to be talking about the Toronto Maple Leafs. Unfortunately, for some of the people on this podcast, we're also going to be taking a look at some of these teams ready to press the panic button over the next couple of days, because this might mean you have to jump ship on some of these fantasy pieces, people. But thank you so much for making us your first listen every single day. Steele and I see you. We are right at that 600 subscriber mark. And man, we appreciate it. You guys know that. But you also know that we're here to help you get this fantasy and betting money. So, Steele, I'm going to stop this preamble, although I thought it was pretty good today. And I want to get right into some of these injuries because we did an injury special maybe a week ago. We said take a look at some of these pieces on some of these teams that they're going to get options. Hello, cough, cough, Connor Sheary on a tear.
Yes,
now,
sir.
right back, speaking of the Washington Capitals, a couple of other injuries here. We got John Carlsson, but more importantly, potentially, TJ Oshie is on the shelf again, and I believe you said this in the offseason. Buyer beware with a guy like TJ Oshie. And now here we go. Lower body injury. He is going to be out at least a couple weeks. So
says indefinitely as of right now, Flip. And, you know, that's the one thing major concern-wise that you and I talked about in the offseason, even when we were doing our pre-draft rankings and actually doing our mock drafts and all of those sorts of things, about taking a guy like TJ Oshie, or even if you're, taking him off the waiver wire potentially, be concerned about the injuries that continue to follow him around year in and year out. And that's exactly what happens again for TJ Oshie. But there are some opportunities abound for some of those third line, fourth line grinders, like you said. And I have two of those guys that you mentioned off air in my notes right now. Connor Sheary, jumping up to the first line, playing with Dylan Strome and Alexander Ovechkin. He's only been averaging 15 minutes so far this season, but that's going to dramatically increase playing on that top line. He's got 4 goals, 2 assists on the season as well. You mentioned a guy, Connor McMichael, who is out with injury as well. It looks like he's back in the lineup. He's slotting in on the right side, second line with Evgeny Kuznetsov as well.
Yeah.
Those are 2 guys that I'm keeping an eye on. Connor Sheary, Connor McMichael, and even down the lineup in Nick Dowd, who's played pretty good on the fourth line as well. But I'd be considering Connor Sheary and Connor McMichael for waiver wire pickups.
And, TJ Oshie, you and I had talked about that injury concern. You also have to pay credit where credit is due to one of the more clutch performers over the past number of seasons. I talked about liking TJ Oshie on and off the ice. He just seems like one of those beauties that you want to play with, play for. 2 goals and 3 assists as well. This is a fantasy hole that you're going to have to look at filling. And I want to talk about Connor McMichael very quick. Good friend of the show, by the way. Hasn't had a very good opportunity to play in Washington. They have had a loaded forward group for the past couple of seasons. This is a guy who got it done at every single level that he's played at, and I am not ready to put the book out on him. He has a first-round draft pick as well. Connor McMichael is worth a look. I don't know what's going to happen, but you better have him click that little red flag and keep your eyes on Connor McMichael. I'm not saying maybe add him right now today, because I don't want to burn, an addition in a week where also I think the Caps only play a few times this week, a couple times.
Yeah.
So keep your eye on Connor McMichael. You said that point about Connor Sheary as well. But the Washington Capitals, whatever you think about them, they are still going to score some goals with Alex Ovechkin and Kuznetsov in that top six. So pay attention to those around them. Steele, let's move on to one other injury here because I have a player in Seth Jones that was off to a decent start. He's also so important to the Chicago Blackhawks that he's one of those de facto D-men that just because he is
Yeah.
a number one, and they are so invested in this player, just paid him a big-time contract in the offseason. He is out for 3 to 4 weeks. And also, maybe talk about how good the Chicago Blackhawks have looked. Andreas Anastasiou with a goal of the year candidate the other night. They're putting up points.
That was beautiful.
Let's talk very quickly about the Seth Jones injury because, and I want your take on this blue line in Chicago is like literally throw a dart at the board. Jack Johnson is now on the top pairing. This opens up an opportunity for some of these players. Connor Murphy, worth a look, putting up points, putting up hits, putting up penalty minutes. I'm just saying, I don't know what to do with this blue line in Chicago, but this Seth Jones injury to fantasy owners, it's huge. Defensemen are hard to replace.
Yeah, look, it's a tough blow for the Chicago Blackhawks, especially how great they started in the month of October. And, obviously their best defenseman, top defenseman, and Seth Jones being out for the next 3 to 4 weeks. I believe this exact same injury happened to him last year where he was out 4 or 5 weeks with a finger injury, or you had surgery on a finger or something like that. But honestly, yeah, you're right. Jack Johnson, Jake McCabe on the first line, D pairing. I was actually considering Caleb Jones on the third D pairing as well, because he's put up there on the first power play unit now. The younger brother of Seth Jones playing decent. It's just a tough blow to the Chicago Blackhawks and anyone who has him for the as a fantasy owner. You got to put him obviously on the IR for the next 3 to 4 weeks. But again, I mentioned this on Monday's episode for the waiver wire pickups. Brandon Montour and Braden McNabb are still out there and below 40% owned. So those are two other defensemen. Hopefully they're available in your league. If not, there should be a couple of others as well.
They're going to start to be snapped up if bodies keep dropping. Jamie Drysdale also, we'll get ahead of ourselves very quickly, but Jamie Drysdale is now potentially done for the year. And I know he has 0 goals and 0 points or he maybe picked up an assist in the other game, but I don't think he got it. He has no points in 8 games, but deep fantasy, keeper dynasty, you have your eye on Jamie Drysdale. You drop Seth Jones. Now you're going to be looking at that waiver wire, the guys you mentioned. I also shout out to you, and maybe this makes me feel like a bit of a goon, but Caleb Jones, Seth Jones's brother, shout out to you for that little tidbit. Didn't know that. The Chicago Blackhawks, though, of course, this happens to them after they've played so good. Seth Jones goes down. But realistically, there are some fantasy notes to be paying attention to, people. We mentioned the waiver wire yesterday. Steele just brought up 2 good fill-ins. They're going to be as good as you can get because trying to replace a Seth Jones, only 4 assists so far, but he is so valuable, eating 25, 26, 27 minutes a night, filling out categories. Anyway, you got to be paying attention to that. Steele, we're going to be talking big-time bets because you're picking up steam. We're starting to make this holiday money. Christmas bills are serious. I got debt collectors all over the place for this wedding. I'm unsure what's going to happen, but I do know we're also going to have to talk about the Toronto Maple Leafs around the break because there are a lot of fantasy GMs invested into these players big time. And I know they're still holding value, but we're going to get there. Let's pay the bills. Let me talk about Simply Safe. I have to let you know, I mentioned the holidays. Did you know that over the holidays, property crimes like burglaries and package thefts spike across the country? That's why our friends at Simply Safe Home Security are offering 50% off their award-winning security system so that more families just like your own can feel safe and secure this holiday season. Order your Simply Safe system for half off today and enjoy advanced security and greater peace of mind this entire holiday season. And let me just tell you very quickly why Steele and I love it. He used it at his apartment out west. I'm using it here at my house in Ontario. Whatever your setup, 24/7 around the clock monitoring from the agents at Simply Safe and their tech support staff. They have your back, they have your family's back, and they will keep you safe around the clock. So make sure you tune in and tap into what I'm saying. Don't miss your chance to save big on the only security system Steele and I recommend. Get 50% off any new Simply Safe system at simplysafe.com/Locked Locked On NHL. This is their biggest discount of the year. Don't wait till Christmas to give yourself a gift. That's simplysafe.com/lockedonnhl. There is no safe like Simply Safe.
Thank you so much for making the Locked On Fantasy Hockey Podcast your first listen every single day. For your second listen to go check out Game to Game NHL. Every moment, every performance, every result. Locked On Game to Game covers all games from across the league with local analysis that only Locked On hosts can deliver. Follow Game to Game on Locked On NHL, available on all podcast platforms, including YouTube. Thank you so much for tuning in for today's episode with Flip and I. And Flip, let's get back into the conversation. We need to talk about the Toronto Maple Leafs and the trouble they are going through over the span of last week. They're on a 4-game losing streak. And if you don't mind, I need to start off here and really just vent a little bit. And, a lot of this is not going to be fantasy-based conversation. It's really just talking about the facts of how bad this team has been in the month of October. And, there's a lot of questions out there of why this team is so angry right now, or why fans are so angry at this team right now. And I'm going to tell you why. Please. I'm looking at the league standings right now, and you've got the St. Louis Blues, who are 3-4-0. They've lost four games in a row. The Colorado Avalanche, 4-4-1, lost 2 in a row. The Pittsburgh Penguins are 4-4-1 and have lost 4 in a row. And the Toronto Maple Leafs, 4-4-2, and they've also lost 4 in a row. Now, what do you think those 3 teams, besides the Maple Leafs, have in common that the Leafs don't have? There's one thing in common with those 3 teams.
Aside from a backbone and a bit of grit, I don't know, Steele. Why don't you just tell me, because I'm ready to pop off at the hip here as well on this topic.
Look, the one thing those 3 teams have in common is they have a Stanley Cup ring over the last 6 years. That's the one thing those teams have in common besides the Toronto Maple Leafs. And those teams, they know how to succeed. Are they happy with their season record right now? Are they happy with the way the month of October's gone? Obviously not. But the point of this conversation is those 3 teams, the Blues, the Penguins, the Avalanche, they've won cups. They know how to win. They know how to succeed. And they know how to turn things around. But the Toronto Maple Leafs have a problem with not being able to do that. There is a trend with, how the Maple Leafs start in the first month. And they did the exact same thing last year, starting in this. I think they were 4-3-2 or 4-3-1 last year.
Basically the same at the same.
And then they went off in 12-2-0. So they do turn things off quickly. But the reason fans are so mad right now is because no matter what, at the end of the year, we know, or the Maple Leafs fans know, that they're not getting past the first round of the playoffs. And they don't know how to win. They don't know how to succeed. And you just sent me a video showing me of Sheldon Keefe yelling at them on the bench after they were still up 3-2.
Exactly. It was just 3-2. Please continue.
It's just honestly, at this point, it's really just inexcusable, the play that we're seeing from the Maple Leafs players out there. I'm looking at their record. I'm looking at their schedule. How can you watch the Leafs go out, lose 4-2, 4-3 against the Montreal Canadiens, the Arizona Coyotes, the San Jose Sharks, the Anaheim Ducks? 2 of those teams, bottom feeders this year. And all 4 of those teams, bottom feeders last year in the standings at that standpoint. So,
yes, sir.
So even though we've seen this before, like I said, slow start in October, they pick it up in the month in November and, to the rest of the end of the season to eventually make the playoffs. Yep. Something needs to change. And I'm not talking about behind the bench. I'm not talking about in the front office.
Okay.
Something on the bench, something in the locker room needs to change. One of those players needs to get traded immediately.
Look, you and I put a lot of hard work, research, time, side time. We're texting constantly. We are in constant communication to make sure we feed our listeners and watchers and everyone out there what they need to know to dominate their fantasy league as much as possible. And sometimes we have to take a sidebar for 5 minutes because we are human beings. And we are also very close to this league and we're close to this team. I'm 34 years old, Steele, and I have watched enough hockey with, where I've worked with the CBC, Sportsnet, The Score. I've watched a lot of damn hockey. And what I'm seeing from this Maple Leafs team is just the opposite of what you want to see in a winner. There is no killer instinct. The attitude on the bench last night with Keefe, and you mentioned the video I sent you. Check that out because Keefe, they give up a bad goal for 3-2, and he starts ripping into them a little bit, not even heavy. And you have one player on the bench around him, even looking near his direction, and that was Jason Robertson, a guy who very badly needs that coach's approval to give himself a shot in the NHL right now. William Nylander's looking around, and everyone else. All I want to say is this, Steele, because what I'm seeing, the fantasy value with the Toronto Maple Leafs is still there. Tavares has 10 points in 10 games. Nylander, 10 points in 10 games. Marner, 9 points in 10 games. That also, though, from those guys, they need to be bringing those points at times that matter. There's no killer instinct from this team, Steele. They look soft. You mentioned that. There's no backbone. They go down even one goal. There's nothing there. Blowing leads, bad breakouts, bad starts. At some point, though, what you said holds true 100%. On the bench, the players need to be held accountable. Some needs to be shaken up. But I'm done with the front office, Steele. I'm done with Kyle Dubas. And I like Sheldon Keefe as a coach. But if it means that the team starts playing better, I'm sorry. I'm done with it all as well. Enough with the Shanaplan BS. Dubas has been handheld and given way too much of a long leash. This doesn't happen in not even any other league. This doesn't even happen along the NHL. I don't understand what's going on in the front office with the Toronto Maple Leafs because it is time to wake up. I'm done with it, Steele. They just look like a pushover, and I'll leave it at this. Even if you're a Leafs fan, Leafs hater, or otherwise, if you know hockey and you've been watching some of these games, and I know you and I were texting constantly last night for that Ducks game or 2 nights ago, that was a really hard team to watch. They look dejected. The energy is doo-doo, and I'm ready for a change. And I would just say this, buyer beware with some of the peripheral pieces that had good years last year, Kerfoot, Bunting, and otherwise, who are off to kind of semi-slow starts.
Yeah.
You might not be getting that value with those players if this Leaf ship starts sinking, Steele. So that's a little bit of a fantasy tie-in to bring us back. But man, I'm heated. I need a water or something.
Look, I know I've seen videos of Kyle Dubas. He's immediately frustrated. And, I go back to a tweet I saw from our good buddy, Michael Amato. He tweeted out this the other day. If they were going to fire Sheldon Keefe, the perfect opportunity should have been in the offseason when there was a lot of coaches out there. Peter DeBoer, Barry Trotz,
good
Bruce
coaches.
Cassidy as well. Good coaches. Now, all you think about that's left, it's only Barry Trotz, and we don't even know if he wants to coach right now.
Why would you want to come to Toronto and coach?
Why would you want to come to the Toronto Maple Leafs?
Barry Trotz, this is the opposite situation of a Barry Trotz team right now.
Yeah.
If you're Barry Trotz, you don't want to come near this situation with a 10-foot pole.
You really don't. And I also saw this as well. Like last night, Mitch Marner got benched for one shift. If I was Sheldon Keefe, he should have been benched for the rest of the third period. First of all, terrible giveaway for the first goal. Literally just a muffin right up in the middle, in the slot of his own defensive zone, and Jakob Silfverberg scores. The second goal as well, he's trying to stick handle along his blue line between two guys and loses it, and Trevor Zegras gets sent on a breakaway. Now, he gets benched for one shift, and he goes down the tunnel and starts slamming his stick like a toddler doing throwing a little tantrum. You got benched for one shift. You should have been benched for the entire third period after how you played that game. We could have said the same thing about Auston Matthews against the San Jose Sharks. When they lost 4-3, he looked awful out there.
He needs to be better.
They all need to be better. They haven't scored more than 4 goals this entire season.
And that's it right there, Steele. They all need to be better. And I think you said to me a couple of weeks ago, just way too soft. No pushback, no resiliency, and no backbone. We have some backbone on this show. I hope that little Leafs rant, we had to get that off our chest. We promised.
I feel so much better. I feel so much better.
I hope you're feeling better because I still feel a bit sick, but maybe that's because I've been drinking for a week and a half and I'm on a wedding heater. That's a whole other topic for a whole other show. Speaking of heaters, my boy Steele has been picking up steam with his picks. We have our locks of the night and our betting breakdown coming up right after the break.
Thank you so much for making the Locked On Fantasy Hockey Podcast your first listen every single day. Thank you so much for tuning in for today's episode. Make sure you hit the subscribe, hit the follow button. We're almost at 600 subscribers. We're hoping to get to 700 by the new year. So keep on subscribing. Keep on letting your friends know. Share the podcast. Hopefully we can get there. And again, we really appreciate all the love and support. Flip, big time bets, a big board of games for Tuesday. Big time bets. I'll throw it over to you. What is your first bet of the night?
I took some heat for taking Ilya Sorokin very early in our fantasy league with our listeners. And as much as I've been blaming my poor results on my life situation and really just not being paying attention to my team, which is my own fault and good for everyone in our listener league who are doing well. That's not me to start, but that's okay. Ilya Sorokin, though, has been worth the early draft. He has looked good. I understand that the Islanders are 5-4. The Blackhawks are now dealing with a couple of injuries to some decent pieces that have been important to their starts, Tyler Johnson and Seth Jones. I know they've been playing well. The Islanders have been playing pretty good as well. I'm feeling the odd for the Islanders on the road. I know it's minus 175. I thought it was better, but I'm going to stick to my guns. I like the Islanders here on the road. A little pesky team who have looked better already, Steele, so I'll take that as well. I know they might not be as bold as your prediction of finishing in the third spot in the Metro. Lots of time and lots of hockey left.
Oh, yeah.
Give me the Islanders, a good road team against the Blackhawks, who I think are, that bubble's about to burst for their hot start.
Look, and hopefully Matthew Barzal can put one behind the net or put one in the net for his first goal of the season. He's got 10 assists for me, but I need those goals for this.
He's going to pop one tonight for you. I'm going to call it. And you know what? I'm going to bet on it too for fun.
All right, there we go. I'm going to put some money on Matthew Barzal anytime goal because he really needs it. And, against the Chicago Blackhawks, it should be a pretty high-scoring game. But my first pick of the night, I'm going to the Nashville Predators money line, plus 140 against the Edmonton Oilers on the road. Look, if Jack Campbell's starting in net, which I presume he is, I have no faith in him right now. He's been absolutely detrimental to the Edmonton Oilers. I wouldn't be surprised if it was Stuart Skinner. We don't know as of right now while we're recording this episode, but I'm going to take the Predators on the money line. I said this last week that the Predators were going to shift gears for the better in the month of November. They already started pretty decent. They had they got shut out by the Washington Capitals the other day, but nonetheless, UC Saros, Roman Josi, Philip Forsberg, that top line of theirs, they need to be better. I expect them to be better in the month of November.
And what did you say the odd was on that? Because that's got to be a
plus
decent
140.
Yeah, that's a good plus money bet. The Oilers have been up and down. My concern would be the big-time win that they just had on the weekend against the Calgary Flames. That's either going to do one of two things. This is a letdown spot, or they're going to go on a bit of a run. So I'm staying away from that game. If there was a move, though, I don't mind the plus money odds there, Steele. Also, I think what you said about Nashville getting better, they are way better than what they've done so far. Roman Josi,
a lot of teams right now.
I think he popped a goal and 2 assists the game before they got shut out. So he's coming around a little bit, and I really do think he is so important to that team. Aside from UC Saros, and you mentioned the top line, Roman Josi is the straw that stirs the drink there. Almost dropped a little F-bomb. Sorry, we're keeping it clean, people. But at the end of the day, Nashville on the road, they're a decent road team as well. I mentioned that. Let me get to my second pick, if you don't mind. We're going to keep it clean, people, I promise. I'm going to combo my second pick with a little 2-pick parlay. I don't do this very often, but I like this. And, you might have to actually do these bets separately. Certain platforms won't let you do this just on its own. But I'm loving the Canucks money line, and I'm also loving the Bo Horvat anytime point. Bo Horvat has been the consistent for the Vancouver Canucks this season. I know the New Jersey Devils have looked good. They're going across the country, across the continent here, and I don't like the spot for them at all, Steele. Not a good road team. Talking about good road teams. Vancouver Canucks, good spot. 2 in a row now.
Yeah.
Give me the Canucks on the money line, plus 100. That's my second pick. And then, I'm not sure how much I'm going to sprinkle on the Bo Horvat anytime point, because he has been hot. The odd might not be great. We'll tweet those out. But I'm feeling Bo Horvat to continue his heater, Steele. He's just looked so good.
Yeah, and I mentioned to you on off air that I think Thatcher Demko is going to have a hell of a game against the Devils as well. Yes. So I expect a little bit of an under in this game, even though the Devils just won 7-1 against the Blue Jackets. But that is not my pick. My next pick, I'm taking the Wild on the money line. The odds aren't great, but minus 245 on the money line against the Montreal Canadiens, who are coming off a big 7-4 win. But they're on the road now, going to Minnesota territory. And Minnesota's on the come up right now. They've played excellent their last 3 or 4 games. I've got the money line, the Wild on the money line. And if you don't mind, my lock
Please.
of the night, I can't believe the odds for this right now. I expect by game time or an hour before game time, this should change. But the Bruins on the money line on the road, plus 105 against the Pittsburgh Penguins, who have lost 4 games in a row. That's just too good to say no to. So I've got the Bruins at plus 105 on the money line for my lock of the night.
Yeah, this Minnesota team is, I like your pick. I like your lock of the night, but I have to talk about the Minnesota Wild because they're also my lock of the night, Steele. Not yours, but I know you're betting on them. Look, I know they just lost to the Detroit Red Wings and then beat the Chicago Blackhawks. But those wins against the Montreal Canadiens and Ottawa Senators, I think, are more indicative of truly how good this team is than their slow start. And Kirill Kaprizov is starting to heat up very nicely, very, very nicely. And this slots into a really good spot for him and for the Wild. Credit due to the Montreal Canadiens, who are looking good and looking confident under Marty St. Louis. I'm not going to take away from that, but that bubble bursts a little bit tonight. I like Minnesota at home. They only have 1 win at home this season. They are one of the best home teams in the league over the last 6 seasons. So I think that's going to start to turn around in a big way because that building is a hard one to play in. Give me the Minnesota Wild on the money line. I'm going to take that doo-doo odds deal. Minus 275 is a lot to wager.
Yeah.
But we're going to do it because that just seems like free loot tonight. I think the Wild start to pick up steam, just like this podcast. So let's hammer the Wild on the money line.
I couldn't agree more with you, Flip. And I will say this, your prediction, your bold prediction of Cole Caulfield scoring 35, 40 goals, it's looking pretty good right now. He's got 7 goals, 10 points on the season. So kudos to you.
Thank you, sir.
Of making that selection, but before the season started. Thank you so much for making the Locked On Fantasy Hockey Podcast your first listen every single day. For your next listen, though, go check out Locked On Sports Today podcast, the biggest stories of the day, plus instant reactions, big game recaps, and the take of the day. Available on the Odyssey app, YouTube, and wherever you get your podcasts, just like this podcast right here. Make sure you hit the subscribe and the follow button. Thank you so much for tuning in for today's episode once again. Have a great day. Good luck with all your bets out there, and we shall see you back here again tomorrow.
Peace.